Jesus took the 12 aside and told them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. He will be handed over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, and spit on him. They will flog him and kill him. On the third day, he will rise again." The disciples did not understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them, and they did not know what he was talking about. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. They told him, "Jesus of Nazareth is passing by." He called out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. When he came near, Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord, I want to see," he replied. Jesus said to him, "Receive your sight. Your faith has healed you." Immediately, he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they also praised God.
On Friday evening, things were a little different where I'm standing. Instead of me up here, it was Steve Price, gospel magician. We see this picture of him. He's kind of a cross between Paul Daniels and Harry Hill. And it was a fantastic evening. He did a magic show for the families of the local youth club children. And it was brilliant. He's funny. He's incredibly skilled. He's been kind of 4 or 5 times. And there's one trick that he does where somebody's watch, this time it was Tim's, before it's been Paul's, end up inside a loaf of bread that is sealed inside a plastic bag. I knew this trick was coming. And I'm there at the back on the desk, and I'm staring. I'm looking at all the things that you're not supposed to be looking at. I'm ignoring all of his efforts to distract me. I'm just staring at Tim, I can't see his watch, staring at this where I know the loaf of bread is. Do I know how it's done? Not a Scooby-Doo. Not a clue. I've seen it multiple times, but I've got no idea how he does this trick. I love watching skilled illusionists. If I'm going to get distracted on YouTube, it's either watching drummers or magicians. I just love watching it and just thinking, I've got no idea, that's amazing. And then somebody spoils it in the comments and the magic has gone. There's always that feeling of being 1, but maybe sometimes 10 steps behind the guy on the stage. They've got something going on. This is what I think I'm supposed to be watching, but there's something else going on, and I don't really get what's going. Actually, as you look there, things make sense. He stood there, and he's ripping something, or he's filling something up, or he's building something. You kind of follow that. And then suddenly something amazing happens, and you get, okay, that's amazing. But there's some bit in the middle that you just think, yeah, I've definitely missed something there. You see, Steve had a purpose, and I could see the end result, but for the life of me, I had no idea how he got from one to the other. I wonder if for many people today, our view of God is quite similar. That we've got this vague notion of God. We kind of like the idea that there's some kind of God who is up there in the sky. And we like the end result of being in heaven with family, enjoying family times without the conflicts, and we'll just do that forever. Maybe God will turn up from time to time. But we're a little bit hazy on the detail of how we get from where we are today to that nice little comfortable vision of everybody in heaven at the end. God kind of stands at the front. There's a bit of smoke and mirrors, and then we all end up in a nice place for the rest of eternity. Is there more to see than that? Is it just that we go about our lives and then we go and hang out with God and that's fine? Or is there more going on in the story? See, a question of fundamental importance for us all is, what do you see when you look at Jesus? What do you see when you look at Jesus. It's key for us. Brothers and sisters, friends, there is no more important question than what you see when you look at Jesus. When we think of our family and our friends, those who aren't walking with Jesus, those who don't know him, there is no more important question than what do you see when you look at Jesus. And so this Easter, I want us to look afresh at Jesus. Again, every week we look at Jesus. We sing about Jesus. We preach about Jesus. But particularly the very heart of our faith, as Jesus approaches Jerusalem, as he dies upon the cross, as he rises again. Talking to someone just this morning, there is such a danger that we take these things for granted. I know Jesus died. I know Jesus rose again. I stand here and tell you about it. The moment that it stops having that profound impact upon my life, that it doesn't blow my mind that the God of heaven came in human form, that he died and then he rose again. The moment that stops having an impact on my life is an incredibly dangerous time. And we're going to use Luke's gospel. Luke the doctor. Luke who went out and researched so that we could know the certainty of what we read. We're going to allow him to take us on this journey as we walk with Jesus to see what happened and what it means for us. And we're going to start today by asking, do you see the King? Do you see who Jesus is? And we're going to do that by looking at what the disciples saw, what the blind man saw, and what the crowd saw, ultimately, so that we will see Jesus. So first, what the disciples saw. Jesus had this group of 12 guys who he'd drawn together about 3 years before the passage that we've come to this time, and he'd begun to teach them and to show them and to invest in them. Now these guys, they'd seen it all. They'd heard Jesus speak publicly. He'd taken them aside and he'd spoken to them privately. They'd had questions asked. They'd had concerns addressed. They'd seen the miracles. They'd seen the displays of power. They'd been in the boat when he calmed the storm. They'd given out the bread and the fish when he fed the multitudes. Nobody knows Jesus like these boys know Jesus. And as the day of his death draws nearer, Jesus wants them to grasp the scale of what's going on. Verse 31, Jesus took the 12 aside and told them, we're going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. They're on their way to Jerusalem. They're heading there for Passover. Jerusalem is the capital city, and they're going for what is the centerpiece of the Jewish religious year. The Passover festival celebrates the great salvation event of the Old Testament, when the Lord rescued his people from slavery in Egypt under Moses. And so the whole nation would gather together in Jerusalem to remember this, to eat the Passover meal, to celebrate the Lord's goodness to their ancestors and his goodness to them. But this will be no ordinary celebration. This Passover will be unique amongst every Passover that had happened before. See, Jesus seems to be saying that this week is when all of God's plans come to fulfillment. Everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. See, when Jesus talks about the Son of Man, he's talking about himself. The Bible gives many, many names and titles to Jesus, but this is the one that he used most for himself. And it takes us back to the Old Testament book of Daniel, where we were in the autumn term. See, Daniel the man, living about 500 years before Jesus, had this incredible vision of heaven. He saw God described as the Ancient of Days in his throne room, with a multitude around him and the voices of praise ringing out. And the vision continues in chapter 7 and verse 13. Daniel says, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Could you imagine the excitement amongst the disciples at this moment? From the early days when Jesus first used that title, and as they saw the things that he did, the way that he healed, the things that he said, their excitement would grow. The Son of Man, the one with all authority, the one with all power, the one in the very presence of God. That is who we are walking with. And now the moment is coming. We're going to go to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be enthroned. They would see Jesus reign in mighty power, and they, his closest friends, the ones that he's invested in for 3 years, oh my word, life is going to be good for us. We've backed the right horse, boys. Here comes the Son of Man, and we're going to ride in glory to reign in Jerusalem. Except, verse 32, he will be handed over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, and spit on him. They will flog him and kill him. No, hang on. That can't be right. That's not how it works. Let's compare the two. Let's look at that verse of what is supposed to happen to the Son of Man. And then look at what Jesus just said. That doesn't make sense. Surely that's wrong. There's not a lot in common between those two things. There's authority given in Daniel 7, and it's lost in Luke 18. The nations worshipping him to the Gentiles abusing him. From an everlasting dominion to an early death. From glory to shame. I wonder if their heads were so blown that they didn't hear the end. End of verse 33. On the third day, he will rise again. There's too much to take in. And even though this wasn't the first time that they'd heard it before, Jesus had told them this repeatedly. The paradox of it all was just too much. He seems to be the Messiah, the Son of God, the Son of Man, the promised one from all of the past. And yet he keeps talking about death. And he's only 33 years old. Verse 34, the disciples didn't understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them, and they didn't know what he was talking about. Sounds like me watching Steve's Tricks on Friday. But Luke is really making a point here. Do you notice 3 different ways he tells us that they didn't get it? They didn't understand. They just couldn't get the big picture. They didn't see what was going on. Its meaning was hidden. They just couldn't work it out. They didn't have the mental capacity. They didn't have the hearts. Just weren't able to work out what was going on. They didn't know what he was talking about. It was like a foreign language. They understood all the individual words, but they just couldn't piece together what was going on. What did the disciples see? Very little. Very little. As far as the great scope of God's plans was concerned, they were pretty much blind. You see, they had their own view, their particular view of Jesus, and it didn't allow for him to do the unexpected. They saw the glory, but they didn't see the weakness. They saw life, but they didn't see death. See, the glory of the gospel, when you get to the very heart of what it is that we believe, it's that Jesus is the Son of Man from Daniel 7, and that all of those things written about him are true. But the path to glory is paved with suffering. It was for Jesus, and it is for us. All of God's purposes, the heart of his revelation itself to humanity. How do you know what God is like? You look at verses 32 and 33. He'll be handed over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, and spit on him. They will flog him and kill him. On the third day, he will rise again. Do you see? Do you see that? If you're looking past or beyond or away from those verses, you won't see God as who he is. The life of faith is the path that Jesus took. Suffering first, glory to come. Why do you think it is that Jesus said to his disciples, if you will follow me, then you must take up your cross and follow me? Following Jesus is a life of crucifixion into resurrection. Do you see? Do you see? The disciples didn't. I wonder, do we? Back to the Jerusalem road. And what happens next is two things. Well, it's more than two things, but two things in particular. Firstly, it's a true story. I believe that what we're about to look at actually happened. But I also believe that Luke, and by extension and initiating the Lord, uses it as a picture to show us what Jesus came to do and what he does for us. And it begins in a very familiar way for that time and place. Verse 35. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. Jericho was on the way to Jerusalem, the natural route for Jesus, the disciples, to head through on their way. And as they were going through, they would have seen this man who would have been incredibly familiar. See, for a blind man with no job prospects, in a state with no welfare provision, there weren't many other options than begging. Probably along the way, they'd have seen many. They'd have passed this guy and seen many more. It was a common sight in this place at this time. And as far as society went, he'd have been right down at the bottom. Verse 36, when he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. Now, a crowd was an exciting prospect, especially at Passover. This annual pilgrimage was looked forward to by the nation, and so many would have saved up to come to the capital city to enjoy the week of celebrations of the Passover. Maybe, in this guy's mind, there'll be a few spare coins. Maybe this will be a bumper day in the midst of a bumper week. Today could be a profitable day, but one phrase changed everything. Verse 37, they told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. There's a huge crowd, but one name is mentioned to this blind man. The cogs start turning in his head. I know him, he thinks. Here goes. Verse 38. He called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, of course, it could be asking for mercy in the shape of a few coins. Show mercy to me and give me just enough so I can buy my lunch. But I don't think that's the case. Did you notice what he calls Jesus? It's the Son of David. Once again, we're back in the Old Testament to the greatest king of Israel, King David, the one who killed Goliath. Back in 2 Samuel chapter 7, God makes this incredible promise to David about a future descendant. Here's some of it. I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. What does the hope of the Old Testament look like? Well, it's got something to do with this descendant, this son of David. 1,000 years before Jesus, 500 years before Daniel, God is telling the same story. Do you see that? That all of his plans and his purposes will come together in this Son of David, this Son of Man. And the blind man sees it. The blind man sees it. See, the question is, who's blind in Luke 18? Actually, it's not the blind man. Outside of Jesus, he has the sharpest vision in the whole text. And he won't be stopped. Verse 39, those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. There's a desperation to meet Jesus. He knows there is no hope for him outside of this man. A heartfelt cry from deep within that this man from Nazareth, he can meet my need, will revolutionize me. And then verse 40, Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. When he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Can you imagine what it must have been like to hear that voice, to hear those words, this downtrodden, rejected, vulnerable man framed with the eternal Son of God as this scene slows right down. Lord, I want to see, he replied. How many times had he thought that? Thought that I want to see. How many times had he voiced that to other people? If only I could see. But today there's hope as his pulse quickens. Verse 42, Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight. What a moment this was. A life defined by darkness, awkwardness, poverty, and shame, redefined by immediately. Immediately. As the light poured into his newly healed eyes. What a first sight. The man that he knew by faith, suddenly he sees in his sight as Jesus, the smiling face of Jesus fills his vision. Of all the things that he would have dreamed of seeing, nothing would have compared to seeing Jesus. And what else could he do? Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. What was the response? It was the only response. He followed Jesus and he praised God. What did the blind man see that the disciples didn't? His need for mercy. His need for mercy. The disciples thought they'd just follow Jesus side by side into glory. But the blind man understood that he deserved nothing from Jesus. If Jesus had kicked dust in his face, that would have been about what he deserved. He deserved nothing from Jesus, and he threw himself on his mercy. The disciples were following the glory, but the blind man knew that a life of humility was the way to approach Jesus. You see, one of the key problems that we have is that we think we deserve something from Jesus. He needs to recognize my efforts. He needs to make my day go better. He needs to give me answers. He needs to improve my circumstances. And in that, we're blind. You see, we come to him knowing that we have absolutely nothing to offer him. We've got no rights at all before him. We recognize who he is, and we ask for mercy. And in that act, in that moment, we are transformed. The light floods in, and we see Jesus. The spiritual blindness falls, and Jesus is revealed. So very simply, have you done that? Have you done that? Have you come to Jesus for mercy, recognizing your own place before him, your own position as one stained with sin, one guilty, one ashamed because of what your life is like? Do you see his exalted position as the crucified and risen Savior? And if you have, are you living a life of humble confidence that Christ will continue to show you mercy, and you can live your life in the freedom that the mercy of Jesus brings? Do you see the love that shows undeserved mercy? Brothers and sisters, see him and believe. It's what the blind man saw. But what did the crowd see? See, what's interesting as you look in this story is who we relate to. Who do you identify with in the story? It's clearly not Jesus. If you're putting yourself in the place of Jesus in this story, you need to go back and read it again. He is unique. Write that down. That's important. You're not Jesus. Actually, the 12, they were ordinary people, but they were given extraordinary roles by the Lord to be the human foundation of the church. Yes, we can learn from the disciples. Sometimes there are things that we need to do, but generally we're not them. Even the blind man had a particular place in God's plans in this moment that's different from our day-to-day lives. Us, we're the crowd. We're the crowd standing, watching these things. So what did they see? What did the crowd see? Well, back to the blind man, hearing that it was Jesus passing by, verse 38. He called out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. What did the crowd see? They saw themselves and Jesus as a reflection of them. They didn't care about this guy. They'd passed hundreds of these guys. They'd pass 100 more. They didn't care about him. And they knew that Jesus was far too important to be bothering with people like him. Look at how Luke describes them. Those who led the way. Now again, I think that was probably a factual point. It was the people who were at the front who would have got to him first. But I think Luke is also making the point that it was those who like to lead, who like to put themselves first. Their attitude certainly reflects that. They're saying to the blind man, Jesus is not for you, and you are not for Jesus. As we've just finished James, there is no faith that puts other people first here in this act. But thankfully, as we've seen, rather than ignoring the blind man, Jesus ignores the words of the crowd. Verse 40. Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. Do you get that? The crowd that rejected this man are now the means by which he will come to Jesus himself. Jesus has said to the crowd, you now need to do my work. He orders them, he commands them to bring the man to him. Was it willing? Was it under obligation? Well, we're not told. But the transformation is complete at the end of verse 43. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they also praised God. Do you see that transformation? It's all about me to, I listen to Jesus, to praising God. What a path that is. And yes, in this passage, they sprinted down it in just a few verses. Well, we might take a bit longer. But the crowd saw the transforming power of Jesus, and it had the most profound effect upon them. So I wonder, in your heart of hearts, in the openness simply between you and the Lord, where are you on that path? It's all about me. I listen to Jesus, praising God. Where are you on that journey from what you can get out of Jesus? How is Jesus that vending machine that you can tap up and he will give you what you need? To listening deeply to him, to trying to wrestle, to get to grips with understanding who he is and what he came to do, to praising him. And ultimately, the thing that moves us along that path of verses 32 and 33. As we go through the Easter story, as we feel the weight of those words, I pray that we will see and respond for the first time, for the 1,000th time, to the transforming power of Jesus. The power that flows from that first Good Friday as he was mocked, insulted, spat on, flogged, and killed. The power of his humiliation as he laid aside his rights as the Son of Man, the Son of David, embracing the shame of sinful humanity, taking the judgment of God that we deserve and dying in our place. The power of his exaltation as he rose again on the third day, triumphing over death, enjoying the vindication of his Father and demonstrating to all the certainty of new creation for all who will trust in him. Do you see his transforming power? Do you see? In the middle of Steve's performance on Friday night, just before we went downstairs for a drink, Becky, who leads our Friday night youth and children's work, she came up and she asked Steve a few questions. Steve is a Christian, uses his tricks in many ways to demonstrate parts of the gospel. And Becky asked him about the difference between the tricks that he does and the miracles that we read of in the Bible that we've been teaching the children about week by week. He talked about how his job is to fool us, to get us to look in the wrong place, to hide what he's doing to impress us. So we go, oh, I've got no idea how you did it, but the end result is fantastic. But when Jesus rose from the dead, when life entered his body and he strode out from the tomb, it was to help us to see. It was to put all of the pieces of the jigsaw together. So suddenly we understood what God is doing in this world. So suddenly we could say, here is God's answer to the suffering and the brokenness of our world and of the human hearts. How can a holy God and sinful humanity be brought together? How can the blind see? How can the deaf hear? How can the lame walk? How can that race that was turfed out of the garden praise and worship the God who made them? Because Jesus died and Jesus rose again. Do you see? Do you see the King, the one with all authority, who laid it down to save? Do you see your need for mercy today and every following day? And do you see that glorious future when, as your eyes close for the final time in this life and open again, to see the smiling face of Jesus? Why do I get excited about Easter? Because I'm excited about that day when I will see Jesus, when my vision will be filled by the smiling, welcoming, loving face of Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked. Lord, I want to see. Let's pray. Open the eyes of our hearts, Lord. We want to see Jesus. Father, I pray that will be true each and every day. I pray that as we walk with Jesus through the Gospels, as we read of your purposes leading up to him in the Old Testament, as we see the growth and the building up of the church, I pray that at all times we will see Jesus, his transforming power at work across history, and the joy that he delights to show mercy. Father, I pray for each of us. I start with myself. Lord, I need to see you more. I need to understand more of the cross and the empty tomb. I need to apply all that is seen, all that is accomplished there to my life more each day. And I pray that will be true for all of us. Father, I pray that over these next couple of weeks, you will do something special in each of our lives. That for those of us who know that we stand on the righteousness of Christ, that we would know such love and such a spur to take what is true of us and long on our knees and in conversation that others come to know Jesus. And if we don't, Lord, I pray that this year will be the time when the light of the glory of God shines in our hearts and we see Jesus. Father, may we lift our eyes and see the King and praise him in his glory. Amen.